Hello and welcome to Politics Today, reaching you live. Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters in the nation's commercial nerve center. I'm Jeffrey Uzon. Let's bring you up to speed with the big happenings in politics and in the polity. President Bola Tinubu signs the Electoral Act into law at INEC to ensure no glitches or hacking of the system during polls. A group known as Kaduna Victims Coalition seek criminal prosecution of former Kaduna State Governor El-Rufai over alleged abuses during his tenure. Professor Odinkalu, who is part of the group, joins me on the program. Thanks again for joining us on the program. Let's begin with what played out yesterday. President Bola Tinubu has now signed the Electoral Act Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2026 into law. The signing ceremony, which took place at the State House in Abuja, was attended by the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, principal officers of the National Assembly, senior government officials, and aides to the President. Speaking at the event, the President Tinubu described the new law as a landmark achievement for Nigerian democracy, saying the legislation will deepen electoral integrity and help democracy flourish. Meanwhile, Senator Gospel Akpabio has expressed strong satisfaction with the newly signed Electoral Act, and the Speaker of the House of Reps also emphasized the importance of the reduction in the number of days of notice for election.
What is crucial is the fact that you manage the process to the extent there will be no confusion, no disenfranchisement of Nigerians, and that we are all going to see democracy flourish. It is time that we have confidence in our system. No matter how good the system is, it's managed by the people, promoted by the people, and the result is finalized by the people. In fact, for final results, you are not going to be talking to the computer, you are going to be talking to human beings who will announce the final results. And when you look at the crux of various arguments, maybe Nigeria should question our broadband capability. How technically are we today? How technically will we be tomorrow to answer the call of either real time or no? And we need to avoid glitches. I'm glad you did. Interference, unnecessary hacking in this age of, computer inquisitiveness. Nigeria will be there. We will flourish. We will continue to nurture this democracy for the fulfillment of our dream for prosperity and stability of our country.
We are satisfied that we have met the aspiration of Nigerians. That the issue of real time also comes in. Once you transmit, even if there is no network at that time, once you go to where there is network, it will still drop. So eventually everything will still be shown. So we are happy and satisfied that we have been able to interpret the intentions and the yearnings of majority of Nigerians, not those who are politically motivated, not few people who make noise. Noise is different from lawmaking. And I always say, no matter what we did in the last 2 years, we went to retreat in Lagos, we went to retreat in Ibadan, everywhere. Those things were just mere consultations. The final outcome of what was amended happens in the plenaries. This has never happened since 1960. We have never had electronic transmission of results in any of our laws. We never even recognized the IRF in the 2022 Act. All those things are now there. And at the end of the day, more powers are given to political parties.
The number of days notice, which was earlier in the 2022 Act, 360 days. Now we have seen the wisdom to reduce it to 300 days. And this will inadvertently translate to holding the presidential and National Assembly elections in January 2027. And that will technically avoid conducting election during month of Ramadan of 2027. And I think this is another one piece of unity that the National Assembly has introduced to avoid voter apathy in the next general election.
Well, so that's how things have played out. The National Assembly and at the Villa. But we'll take a quick break. When we come back, I had to sit down right here on the program with Professor Odinkalu, who was a former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. There's a group called the Kaduna Victims Coalition. They are raising concerns over the tenure of El-Rufai, who is embattled facing ICPC, EFCC, and DSS across all fronts. They said, when I engaged him, he talked about the fact that, look, there are so many allegations against him, abuses as alleged against the former governor of Kaduna State, some of which the governor has actually pushed back in the interview he had recently that landed him in some of the things he's dealing with. So I engaged Professor Kalu, who is also part of the Kaduna Victims Coalition, who are asking for criminal prosecution as against the civil proceedings that individually they've been engaged with the governor. But that will be after this break. Stay with us. All right, Professor Odinkalu is the former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, joining us on the program today. Prof, thank you so much for coming on the program. Prof, straight to the question of what was reeled out the other day when more like a coalition of people that consider themselves the victims of what had played out under the 8-year reign of former governor of Kaduna State, El-Rufai, who we understand as we speak is still in the EFCC custody. But let me begin by asking what you make of his current battles and allegations from him, looking at it as political persecution, characterizing it as the intolerance of voice of dissent in that sense from the interview you had with our colleague in other station.
In what sense, if you don't mind?
Yeah, in the sense that when he was being interviewed and he talked about issues around maybe this is targeted at opposition in that sense, and given some of the nuances that has come out from his own administration, people like you saying that some of the things he did, and I think we interviewed one Stephen Kefas who talked about his intolerance to dissent. So people are saying he should face justice or whatever is alleged against him, but he's saying that this may also be looking like some kind of political persecution given some of the persons that have been targeted under this administration.
Oh, no, thank you. First of all, El-Rufai is obviously a Nigerian citizen. As a matter of constitutional principle, no citizen should be above the law. But I also do not believe that any citizen should be below the law, not even Nasir El-Rufai. So I start from a principled premise that every citizen deserves due process and every person should be treated equally under law. What that means is that no one should be granted impunity just for the heck of it, or because of who they are, or because they are on any side of the political divide. If Nasir El-Rufai has done things that warrant legal accountability, and I think he has, let me be quite clear about that, then he should be subject to legal process, due legal process. And having cleared that up, I must say one more thing, which is that what I've said is a lot more than Nasir El-Rufai afforded those whom he treated as critics during his time as governor of Kaduna State. He treated people with extraordinary impunity. recklessness, brutality. Some of his victims are dead, including the late Agwam Adara, Dr. Raphael Galadima, who was abducted, ransom paid with his wife, by the way, before he was slaughtered, killed in 2019, I believe. October 2019. That was 3 months after Dadiata had disappeared from his home in Kaduna and has not been found. And in August 2nd this year will make it exactly 7 years since Dadiata disappeared. There were communities that were converted, that he converted at his whim from kingdoms to emirates, which meant that people who were not Muslims, these were communities mostly of Christians, but people who were not Muslims became effectively dispossessed of their communities and dispossessed of the rights to accede to community leadership. There were people whose lands he expropriated. His political opponents had their houses demolished or expropriated by the state. I don't think the one person who can frankly not complain about due process is Nasir El-Rufai. He was despicable as a governor of Kaduna State, with all due respect. And by the way, what is his problem? He was the person more than any other who campaigned to bring the current dispensation to power. I don't think he should be complaining about political persecution because he and President Tinubu were in the same party in 2023. He traveled with President Tinubu to Chatham House, amongst others. He was one of the principal campaigners for the dispensation. Who is persecuting whom?
So, Prof, let's get down to the write-up we saw with your name listed here. Kaduna Victims Coalition, survivors and families demand full accountability for abuses under Nasir El-Rufai. No more impunity, no more silence. What exactly is the expectation from this exactly? Is a group of people that are not survivors or victims looking forward to a litigation process? What exactly is the end game with this?
Yes, yes, I'm on that list. Audu Emekori is there. Gloria Ballason is there. Steve Kefas is there. Midat Joseph is there, I believe. Luka Biniat is there. Now, if you take Luka, for instance, because all of us discussed very explicitly before that statement was put together and signed. Luka was the the Kaduna correspondent of Vanguard. All right, because he had written a story that the then governor of Kaduna State did not like. Luka was abducted, detained, not for 1, 2, or 3 months, and then put to trial. And while that was going on, Vanguard, to my knowledge, because I did get involved as one of his legal team, was required as a precondition for Luka getting any look-in. Vanguard was required to fire him as their Kaduna correspondent. So they did. So Luka eventually prevailed in court, but having prevailed in court, he came out, he didn't have a job, right? Now, I barely escaped abduction by Nasir El-Rufai because a police officer who was privy to the conversations decided to put through a call. I've still not met that police officer till date, although he retired about 2 years ago. Decided to put through a call to tell me that they were going to be moving to abduct me. This was the moment when I was then provided with proof that an application had been made before a magistrate in Kaduna to procure a warrant for my arrest on charges that founded on what? That the day before, the Friday before the first scheduled date of the presidential election in 2019, Nasir El-Rufai had gone on TV to say that 66 Fulanis had been killed extrajudicially in Kajuru. It turned out to be criminally false. The police commissioner said so. NEMA said so. Eventually, I believe the SSS did say so as well. But no, what happened? Nasir El-Rufai doubled down on that. And when you say 66 people, but particularly 66 Fulanese have been killed in any part of northern Nigeria, you can be sure that reprisals will follow with all certainty, if not brutality. Now, so I went on air and denounced that. And for that, Nasir El-Rufai wanted me abducted on charges of incitement, spreading false information. He was the person spreading false information, by the way. And we have been in court. We were in court throughout the period of his rule from then until 2023 to make sure that I was judicially and legally and lawfully protected from arbitrary arrest or abduction. And that case remains in the Court of Appeal as we speak. My lawyer, Gloria Ballasin, who is also a signatory, then became the subject of different activity by his regime to abduct Gloria. Gloria could only continue to practice and defend those of us whom she was defending because Nasir El-Rufai's government was precluded from abducting her by an explicit order of the High Court of Kaduna State. I could go on. Steve Kefas was abducted from Port Harcourt, from River State, taken undercover to Kaduna State, where he was detained for over 6 months. Steve left prison with his life as a matter of luck. Okay? Now, if I could spend all the time we have just discussing the kinds of incredible things that this guy procured as governor, and in each case, he was happy to come on TV and justify himself, justify what he did in the name of exercising power.
Yeah, my apologies, Prof. Because of time. So I remember you had where you made that statement. That should be April 2019 during one of our programs called The Verdict during the election, and you were very clear with your thought that led and snowballed into some of the things you talked about that he had to come counter. But listening to him, he had made mention of the fact that, in fact, when they raised the issue of Dadiata to him, he said he didn't even know Dadiata until it was the gentleman got missing, that Dadiata was more critical of Kaduna State Governor and Ganduje than even his government. So they perhaps trying to say questions should be asked Ganduje. And then the issue of, I think, Meikori and some other persons. He was talking about the fact that Meikori had made a statement that was not true, and he asked him to take down the post, and things just snowballed. But he gave more like refuted literally everything that was put to him by the interviewer. So my question here is to you first and foremost, is the initial question I asked, are you instituting a legal procedure, a proceeding against him? And some of the things you've heard him say, do you have anything to counter what he said? If you can say it in like 2-3 minutes.
Let me take your second question. Can he be countered? Quite a good deal. Pretty much everything Nasir El-Rufai has said is verifiably inaccurate, false, and therefore falsehood. And his proclivity for falsehood is very well established. Now, let's take Dadiata. He claims Dadiata is not a critic of his. Go to Dadiata's timeline, which is still available, and you will see that that is manifestly false. By the way, on the night that Dadiata was abducted between 2 and 4 a.m. on the 2nd of August 2019. Now, on that night, by the way, okay, now Nasir El-Rufai's claim is that Dadiata may have been abducted by agents of the Kano State government. Dadiata was in Kano State up to the 1st of August 2019. On the day he was abducted, he left Kano State late, after 8 p.m. He drove from Kano into Kaduna. If agents of the Kaduna State government, as Kano State government, needed desperately to abduct or dispense with Dadiata, why would they have allowed him to drive all the way at night from Kano into Kaduna? He drove straight to his premises in Banawa after 2 a.m. in the morning from where he was abducted. Why would Kano State allow him to drive into Kaduna State by 2 a.m. in order to abduct him from Kaduna? Tell me that that makes sense. In any case, by the way, that Yatta was abducted from Kaduna State. When he was abducted, Bashir El-Rufai, Nasir El-Rufai's son, tweeted that that people were goading Daddy Yatta when he was saying things he should not have said. So the Nasir El-Rufai family absolutely knew of Daddy Yatta, knew of what he was saying, tweeted contemporaneously to show that what he was saying, what he was tweeting was that he was critical of their father, of Nasir El-Rufai as the governor. There is ample proof of that. It is digitally stored. So on that, that's a lie. Audu has exercised the right of reply with Charles Aniagolu to clearly show that Nasir El-Rufai again was lying on that matter. The federal government is now appears to be taking steps to bring the matters under investigation, and I do think, in response to your first question, that's the right thing to do. I hope he encounters the rule of law, which he was unwilling to accord to his victims.
Prof, totally, because of time, that question I asked you, I don't know whether you answered me. Are you personally or as the group this time instituting a legal proceeding against Nasir El-Rufai, given the formidability of what you've listed as some of the things he's done under his administration?
There are legal proceedings everywhere. Audu's case, I have cases in court, for instance. There are legal proceedings by Audu. Nasir El-Rufai has taken Audu to the Supreme Court. By the way, Audu won in the High Court, he won in the Court of Appeal. Gloria Ballason has taken him to court. The Kajuru community, the Kajuru elders took him to court. Their judgment came through and they won against him. So there are already civil proceedings. What we are asking for is not civil proceedings, because there are quite a few, at least that we know, I'm aware of, or I'm involved with, which are in court. It is criminal proceedings. Nasir El-Rufai needs to go through criminal accountability before mechanisms of law, and let these issues be disposed of in a manner that is provided for in our criminal law. That's what we are asking for. We're not asking for civil proceedings. That we already have responsibility for, and we are mostly undertaking in many ways. And we have judgments to show that he clearly is manifestly liable. And let me add one more thing, by the way. Okay? He has sued me, for instance, before the FCT High Court on allegations of defamation. And I welcome the opportunity, for instance, to go toe-to-toe with Nasir El-Rufai so that he puts his character online, because I call him... Hello?
Go ahead, please. We're about to wrap up, so I just have 30 seconds.
Yes. I called him a vile little man, and I'm actually quite kind in calling him a vile little man. He's suing me, and so we're meeting in court, hopefully in the FCT High Court, because I will contest that in the most vigorous manner. I don't think he has any reputation to protect.
Prof. Almost, thank you so much. We wish I had more time to engage you on this particular matter and other issues, but because of time. Thank you so much, Professor Odinkalu, former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thanks, my brother.
Also, that was my earlier engagement with Professor Chidi Odinkalu. A lot of legal issues that they will all exhaust. This is word against that of the former governor of Kaduna State, who has pushed back on a lot of the things that the professor has said. So this was the professor's, response to some of the things that former Governor Nasir El-Rufai has said is not guilty of. But the court will decide all of that, because we have to bring this coalition group made up of Mr. Chidi Odinkalu, Professor Kalu, and others. But that's it on the program. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jeffrey Zamabala.